This is the Ag Queen Podcast. This podcast explores the agriculture industry with the movers and shakers of those shaping it. Here's your host, Lori Boyer.
We get started on the show here today by introducing my guest. Scott Shuman is joining me for our conversation on the podcast today. He is a partner and auctioneer at Hall & Hall Auction. We're going to learn more about his background and Hall & Hall here in just a moment. And he's also an author of a book called A Million Acres and Counting. And we'll be talking about that too. Scott, thanks for joining me here today for our interview.
Oh, thank you for having me, Lori.
So let's talk about you. Give us a little bio, a little background on yourself to get us going.
Yeah, well, I grew up in eastern Colorado, dryland wheat farm out at Strasburg, and was a 4-H and FFA member, and all through school. Ended up going to NJC for 2 years, Northeastern Junior College, and then Colorado State University, and then received my master's degree at Purdue University in Indiana. And so I've been involved with agriculture basically my whole life. I started an auction company in 1986, sold my first property in 1989. And so haven't looked back. I've pretty much done the same thing my entire career. Married with 3 children and 1 grandchild.
Was Hall & Hall Auction your original firm then, or is this something that you got involved with later in your career?
Yeah, no, my original firm was Shuman Auction Service. When you get out of auction school, most people end up naming a business after themselves and just going after business. And at that time, I was doing farm equipment and household auctions, probably some auctions that should have been garage sales, just trying to get my feet wet and get involved in every aspect of the industry. And then since that time, in 2010, I actually started Hall & Hall Auctions, which was a division of a company that had been around since 1946. So Hall & Hall sells farms and ranches throughout the country. We have 19 offices in 9 states, kind of coast to coast. So I handle all the auction activity for all offices and licensed in real estate in 27 states. And so I move around quite a bit in the ag world.
Certainly have grown a lot since you started your own auction business then, huh?
Right. And I get involved in a lot of different types of, I do a lot of benefit and gala auctions as well. In 19, before we really got shut down, we did auctions from Hawaii to London.
Wow.
And did them in all over the country. I was on the Barrett Jackson staff for a while, selling classic cars. I was on there for 7 years. And now I do some junior livestock auctions, Weld County and Eagle County. I do their livestock auctions, do some work at National Western Stock Show. So I'm kind of all auctions, involved in auction, every aspect of the auction world. In 2017, I was the national president of the National Auctioneers Association. And that was just really eye-opening, serving on that board and serving with auctioneers from throughout the country and understanding those issues that different auctioneers are facing throughout the country. And so that was a great time for me as well.
Not to date you, but I'm going to date you. So how many years have you been an auctioneer then?
Well, I started in 1984, actually working for another auctioneer, and 2 years later then went to auction school. So from 84, so that's 38 years.
What do you like about it? Like, what keeps you motivated and keeps you in the industry and continues to drive you?
Yeah, when I first was attracted to it, I think it was probably because of the auctioneer's chant. And, it's just kind of a fun thing and a neat way to market any type of asset. But then as I started growing in the industry and being more involved, I think it's really more about the people. In what we do, we typically get called when there's some type of a problem or a situation to handle, maybe, from, they say death and divorce and just change of life, different things we get called on. And so it's really about understanding people and helping make a difference in their in their lives. And so that's always, I guess, what I really like, feeling like you've made a difference and you can look back and, knowing that you've done something. Even driving tractor as a young, as a teenager, looking back and seeing how much of the field that you were able to actually work, it's kind of the same way in the auction industry. I look back and see different people that I've been able to help and staying in touch, becoming lifelong friends with a lot of our past clients is probably one of my biggest reasons for staying in the industry. Yeah.
I want to ask you about some of the changes that you've seen over the years. I'm sure you've seen a lot, including technology, but talk to me a little bit more about just kind of the trends in the overall industry over the years since you have been an auctioneer.
Yeah, the auction industry and profession dates way back. I mean, the Roman Empire was sold at auction, to give you an example of how long that industry has been in play. Here in the United States, I think people have related the auction industry with, during the Great Depression, farms that had to be sold, and it was a negative. And they've also related it with RTC days, with the bank collapsing. They relate it to 2008 with the residential housing collapse. So many homes were sold at auction. And so there's been a lot of negative connotations that have gone along with the auction industry. And for some reason, a lot of the assets, every world record that's ever been something that's sold has been done at auction. But those things don't seem to resonate in people's minds. The highest artwork, the highest dollar car that ever sold, those kind of things are all sold at auction. And, so there was a lot of negatives, and the auction industry didn't change so much, at least in the United States. In some countries, that's the first way they think about selling something, is to sell it at auction. In the United States, it's a lot of times has been, well, that's not going to be we're going to list it for a while, or we're going to try to market it some other way for a while. And then if it doesn't work, we'll take it to auction, And I think I've really seen a change where that's, at least with the clients I've worked with, a lot of times I'll get the call saying, well, it's never been on the market. We've never done anything with it. It's a special property. We don't know where to list it at. So we're going to sell it at auction. And so that's been a real positive change. When you bring up technology, in the early 2000s, when eBay first came out, and, amongst auctioneers throughout the country, it was a panic of, oh no, we're all going to be out of business because, everything's going to be taken to the online avenue. And in fact, that wasn't the case. When eBay first came out with auctions, it actually helped the auctioneers more than hurt them, because all of a sudden then people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of an auction. I know what an auction is. Yeah, you can sell my property that way, or you can sell my asset that way. And so it kind of, it was really a positive in my mind. And now the top auction companies around the country all utilize technology, utilizing maybe online auctions. Some do online only. Some do a mixture of online and live auctions, what we call simulcast auction. And there's Zoom auctions. There's all kinds of different ways that auctions have changed via technology.
Scott, do you feel like there's enough new people entering the industry to fill for those that may be retiring or exiting for one reason or another?
There are, there's a lot of auction schools around the country that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but auction schools are having great enrollments. There's a lot of people say, gosh, I think I could do that, or or it's something that excites me. And so from that standpoint, there's a lot of new people entering the business. What I've seen, though, is a lot of them that enter the business kind of expect immediate gratification and immediate success. And so they don't stay in the business quite as long, because it's tough work. It's the auction chant, learning to count and do the actual event is a very small portion of my time or any other auctioneer's time. So it's more of the going out and getting the business and marketing properties or marketing assets. So there's just so much more involved with it that takes a lot of time and a lot of work. And I suppose it's like, any other profession. And and take you, for example, a lot of people say, well, gosh, I've got a great voice and I would love to interview people. I'd love to do a radio show and things like that you've done in the past. But it's taken a lot of work and a lot of years. You've probably got as many years in the radio industry as I have in the auction industry. And it takes a lot of late nights and a lot of studying, a lot of work before you get to that pinnacle point in your career.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I just want to highlight something else that is special about you in particular, and that is your daughter is following in your footsteps, right?
Yes, she is. Yes. And I actually have two daughters. My oldest daughter entered some auction contests herself, and she was a state winner when she was probably a senior in high school, but then went on to teach school. And then I've got a son that's actually done some work in the auction industry, but my youngest daughter, who you're talking about, is the one everyone's reading about. She's also the one that's stealing all my clients. But she's just turned 17 in January, and she was the runner-up at the international contest. She was excited about it, and she came off the stage, and someone gave her a flyer to enter the Kentucky contest. So she went to Kentucky and entered that, and she won that. So the Battle of the Bluegrass, and so she's been written up in several magazines, and she does primarily benefit auctions all over the country. So
wow, impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I'll look forward to interviewing her as well. I was holding off on this question until now because I think it will be a great segue into talking about your book. But what is the most memorable thing that you have sold so far during your auctioneering career?
The one that probably interests people more, where I was working on staff with another auctioneer, but a great friend of mine that I mentioned in the book, Spanky Assiter, but we sold the Batmobile, we sold the ambulance that carried JFK, Beverly Hills Hillbilly car. Some of those things are certainly things that get people excited. But my primary role in the auction industry is selling large farms and ranches. We've done multiple ranches over 40 million, and you hit up the different increment levels. If you're selling, for instance, you're selling a car or a horse and you hit $1 million, the room goes crazy. When you're selling a ranch and you hit 20 million, the room goes crazy. And then you hit 25 and 30 million, and and those kind of things are certainly exciting. The Camp Cooley Ranch would be a big property that a lot of people would know in South Texas that I was able to sell at auction. Sold the property that they filmed Dances with Wolves on, a Triple U property in South Dakota. I've been involved with a lot of really kind of cool properties.
Very cool. I didn't even know all that. So that is pretty neat. I'm sure those are probably some of the things that are in your book. So let's talk about your book. It's called 1,000,000 Acres and Counting.
Yeah. In fact, it just came out this year. You have to get you a copy. It was kind of an interesting, when 2020, spring of 2020, we got shut down, and all of our live events, they said, hey, we're not going to be able to have gatherings. So let's reschedule this for next spring or next fall, that kind of thing. And so overnight, like flip a switch and all of our auctions are canceled. And then at the same time, all of our people in the office were working from home. So I was in the office working by myself and was really thinking about frequently asked questions, trying to beef up my website and that kind of thing, questions in the industry. And, when you get on an airplane and you sit next to somebody and they say, what do you do for a living? And you start those kind of conversations. Well, and typically it's a great conversation. I bet you've met fascinating people just in your line of work. Well, in mine, I mentioned that I'm an auctioneer, and people say, oh, you can talk fast, or they really don't know what to say. And they say, well, why would somebody ever sell something at auction? Why would they sell their home at auction or their property at auction? And I thought, I always have that conversation. And so I had to document it somewhere. And so I started off by documenting some of those frequently asked questions that I get. And I thought, well, that would be pretty interesting. And then I decided I'm going to take some of these auctions and just kind of tell a story about them. And so I started on that. And next thing you know, my wife met up with me and said, gosh, you've written a book. And so I said, oh yeah, I kind of have. And so, so it just kind of evolved. Since that time, though, we've been published, and I kind of follow it online, and it seems like they're selling. So we sell a few about every day, and so that's kind of fun. Yeah.
Where can you find it, Scott? Where can you find your book?
Actually, the easiest way is Amazon.com. So on Amazon.com, and you can either search my name, SHUMAN, or 1,000,000 Acres and Counting, and it'll bring that up. We were at about, I think when I started writing it, we were about 1 million, close to 1.5 million acres. Wow. And now we're about 1.8 million, something like that. So I don't know. Sometime down the road, maybe we'll add to it or come up with more stories.
I was just going to ask you if there's plans for a follow-up book or another edition.
I don't know. As I've looked at it, There's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently with this book, but I'm never writing a book. In fact, if you talk to one of my high school English teachers, they would probably bet you money that that never happened, right? There's some things I would have tweaked or done a little bit differently, but everybody seems to really enjoy it. And, you know, once you start talking about different stories, you leave so much out, you know, as far as different people that were involved and things like that. So I may do a little update from that standpoint, but we've done just in the last year, we've done auctions in 15 states and met some really incredible people and have great stories to go along with it. So you never know, we may add to it someday.
That'll be fun for sure. So since we're coming out of the pandemic, at least cross our fingers, we're going to stay out of the pandemic. So has business really picked back up in the auction world, or things coming back around for you?
In actually 2021 was probably the best year we've ever had in the auction world. And, you know, now we're a little bit of there's a lot of, as you know, a lot of question marks out there as to where we're going. The good news is there's a ton of cash and a ton of buyers out there for probably any asset. So, and people are just climbing over themselves to be able to purchase something. So that's a real good news. From the seller side, you know, and unfortunately, input costs have gone up so much. There's probably a possibility we'll see more farms come on the market, which is, we sell very, very rarely do we sell something that's distressed. At least in my career, since the mid 80s, there really hasn't been distressed properties that we've worked with. And I'm guessing that we may see some other situations where some people have to sell, but you hope not, and you hope we're getting right on the right track. I'm not so sure with some of the financial things going on in the country right now, you know, with cost of everything is just skyrocketing, as you know, and all your listeners know. But so those are things that, you know, that affect every business. When the oil and gas goes down, people don't realize or agriculture is as important as agriculture is in this country. And I think it scares me that we get further and further away. Generations that, you know, used to be, well, dad farmed or grandpa farmed, and now it's great grandpa farmed, or, you know, great grandpa had a farm. And so that concerns me that some of our young people are starting to not understand where their food comes from.
You are not the first one that's mentioned that. Probably won't be the last. I think that is a underlying concern for the ag industry for sure.
Right.
People working on solutions, but I'm not sure we found them or what that's going to be yet.
Yeah, exactly. But programs like yours, I think, help with that. And, you know, people that are really carrying the banner for agriculture, I think I'm very excited about that.
What are some of your goals now? So you've had this long-term career. You've done some big things, sold some awesome things, wrote a book. What are some more goals for you?
You know, I don't know. From a personal standpoint, if folks will read my book, they will also read some of the challenges in doing some of the things that I've done. One of the challenges which I love, I'll tell you what, if you have readers that do buy the book and read it, I would love to hear from them, just to get their thoughts, positive or negative. If they're too negative, be nice on me. But one of the things that I do share is my son one day, and I'll give away a little bit of the book here, but my son, when he was, I believe he was 16 years old, and I'm riding down the road with him, kind of having a real good man-to-man conversation, and I asked him about his goals in career. And he said, you know, I think I'm going to do something with sports. I think I'll be a sports agent, which what kid didn't want to be the manager of LeBron James, right? And so I said, well, that's good. I said, well, what about being in the auction business? And he said, hey, I don't want to take anything away from you, or I've loved that you've been in the auction business. He said, but I want to be there for my kids. And he said, went on to let me know which ball games I had missed of his, and, you know, and things like that. I mean, it was like a knife in my back at the time, you know, thinking, gosh, I've concentrated so much on my career that I've not had a great family balance. And I'm fortunate to have, my wife works with me, does all of our marketing and our company. And so, you know, there was never an issue there, but I think, gosh, I did miss out on a lot of things that my kids had going. And so spending more time with family and kids and things like that is really a goal for me. But work-wise, I love what I do. Love meeting people. I love getting out and doing auctions and seeing how we can help change things for different folks. And so that's really my goal, is to continue doing that. Yeah.
Scott, anything else to talk about today or mention that I didn't ask about that you would like to say?
You always do such a great job that I would guess that any of your guests that leave here don't say, well, Lori, you left this out. Yeah, no, I'd love to meet any of your guests. Our offices are in Eaton, Colorado. And so we're on the west edge of Eaton, Colorado, but we travel all over the country and love to talk to folks that are involved with agriculture and just to have those conversations.
So Scott, your book, it's called, once again, A Million Acres and Counting. It can be found at Amazon. And what is the website then for Hall and Hall Auctions? Yeah,
it's www.hallandhall.com. So it's HALLANDHALL.com. Love to have anybody check out our properties, and they can sign up to get our weekly email if they'd like. Love to hear from folks.
Well, again, I want to thank my guests for joining me. A great conversation today with Scott Shuman. He is partner and auctioneer with Hall and Hall Auction. He's also author. I just mentioned a book. It's called A Million Acres and Counting.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Ag Queen Podcast with your host, Lori Boyer.